Yes, I'd like to welcome you to radio program number, I believe, number 10. But it's my second one in a week or two, maybe a week. And like I said last time, I'm recording these while I'm working, so sound quality isn't the greatest, but I think it's understandable, and hopefully it'll be something that you can use to further your Christian life. I think today's topic, I'm going to do recommended ministries, and maybe some other various topics. Kind of depends on how long it takes. It'll probably just be the one topic. But I've been a Christian since 2006, August 2006, and over the years, and mentioned that while I mow, I've learned a lot of my theology. I listen to a lot of ministry while I work, and that's basically how I got saved. I was listening to the Bible on CD, and then about halfway through Romans, I just paused on a yard I was on and said, wow, for the first time in my life, I believe the story of Jesus. And I honestly didn't know at the time I was getting saved. I just all of a sudden, when I said that, or when I thought that, something happened to me. And I know now that was regeneration and the Holy Spirit indwelling me and sealing me and all those things that happen at salvation. But anyway, so I was listening to the Bible on audio while I was working when I got saved. And then after that, I quickly learned through trial and error. Of course, the first couple of months, I didn't have a clue. I actually, sadly, one of my low points in my Christian life is I actually sent some money to Rod Parsley, who is a wolf among wolves. I'll have to do a show on false teachers sometime. But he's definitely one of them, Rod Parsley, and I didn't know. He was talking biblical language, and he was saying, you send him this money and God will bless you, and I was just so ignorant. I didn't know any better, and I sent him some money. But anyway, that's how, as far as I know, that was the only time I ever sent money to a false teacher. So I learned pretty quick. I kind of, initially just listening to the guy, I could tell this guy's pretty prideful for a Christian. But again, I didn't have any discernment at all. But after a couple months, actually what kind of got me really, really interested in learning theology is of course you hear when you get saved, or the first time you hear somebody say that you can lose your salvation, or then somebody else say, no, you can't lose your salvation. I thought, it kind of scared the crap out of me the first time I heard that, because I thought, okay, yeah, this is what I'm doing with this experience I'm having right now, and fellowship with God, and I know He's working in my life. Okay, now, is it possible that could go away? And it really did scare me. Because I read passages that seemed to say that there's no way you could lose it. And then there's other passages that if you just isolate them, yeah, it does say, it seems like that maybe you could stop believing. And that's another topic I'm not going to go into right now. Obviously, if you listen to me at all, I'm a Calvinist, and I believe in God preserving His elect. But that was what got me into it. I thought, oh man, I'd really like to know if I could lose it, and if I could, then how in the world would that happen so I could avoid doing that? And so I started listening to people, and actually one of the funny, it's no secret to anybody around me that my favorite pastor and Bible teacher, and has been for a long time, is John MacArthur. And how I came about John MacArthur, and he'll be the top number one ministry recommendation I'll have. But how I came about him, I was listening to another program that I'd recommend, Wretched Radio, with Todd Friel, and he played a clip from somebody, and I was interested in what the guy was saying, and so I listened on, and then all of a sudden he mentioned the name John MacArthur. But he wasn't talking about the clip he played. He was talking about something else, I guess. I just didn't catch that. And so I thought, okay, I want to hear that guy. And so I looked him up and ordered some tapes or some CDs from John MacArthur, or it was Grace to You Ministries, is what I found out. And then I put him in, and it was this different guy. It was the guy that I had thought I was ordering was a younger guy, who I think his name, no, I don't want to say because I'm not 100% sure, but it was a younger guy, a good pastor, fired up about the Lord and everything else. But anyway, so I was like, oh man, it's the wrong guy. And I thought, well, heck, I ordered him. Might as well listen to him. And man, I tell you what, after about a half hour of listening to John MacArthur preach, I was like, I've never heard anybody preach like this guy. I mean, he was just explaining the text in a very clear, you know, he doesn't jump up and down and act crazy. He was just methodical and very passionate, but controlled and very knowledgeable. And I became immediately very, very blessed by him and his ministries. I probably ordered, I still have a whole bunch. Of course, now I don't really need them anymore because you can get all his sermons for free on the Grace to You Sermons app, which is that'd be the number one sermon app that I would recommend to anybody. And I'm telling you, if you're looking just to learn the Bible, there's not many better, if any, in my opinion, than John MacArthur. Again, the website is gracetoyou.org, I think. Or no, I'm sorry, gty.org. And the app is if you just type in GTY or Grace to You or John MacArthur on either Android or Apple, it'll come up. And it's the sermons app. And it's all of his sermons. Every single one of them he's ever preached. They're all free now. And also, they add them every week for the ones he's still preaching. And so my number one recommendation for anybody out there who is who's looking to learn the Bible would be John MacArthur and Grace to You. And like I said, his GTY is the website, and he's got an app and everything else. Again, I ordered probably $500 worth of CDs, which I don't regret because I listened to most of them. And of course, now you can get them for free. But I still donate quite a bit because I feel bad. I'm like, well, now I don't have to buy anything. I'll have to. So I donate quite a bit to their ministry because I really do believe he is the most biblical teacher. And of course, he's a Calvinist. Now, the thing with most Calvinists, and if you listen to any of my Bible lessons or radio shows or read any of my papers on my website, you know I'm a Calvinist, but you also know I'm a premillennialist, pre-trib premillennialist, and when it comes to eschatology. And I'm not going to get too much into that, but I believe in a literal millennial kingdom reign by Christ when he returns. But the point I'm trying to make is most Calvinists go the other way on that. They usually are amillennialists, and they don't believe that. So it's hard to find somebody who's a Calvinist who also is a premillennialist, and John MacArthur is that. And through his teachings, and another one I'll recommend, R.C. Sproul, the late R.C. Sproul, and the Ligonier.org ministry, those are the two that really, really impacted my early walk. And they convinced me, biblically, of course, of the doctrines of grace or Calvinism. And so Ligonier is another great one. Again, R.C. Sproul, he passed away a couple months ago, and I really learned a ton from him. I learned a lot on the Trinity. Through him, he's got a real good series on Trinity and Christology. So if you're into those, so the MacArthur, if you Doctrines of Grace, MacArthur, anything really, I would recommend with Dr. MacArthur. But when it comes to the Trinity, R.C. Sproul, I learned the doctrine of the Trinity basically from him. That took me about 6 months. It blew my mind away. But after listening to his series on that, he's got a real good one on that, and in Christology as well. Now, as I said, if you know anything about me, I'm also a Baptist, and R.C. Sproul is a Presbyterian. And so who gets baptized and the mode of that, it would be something I disagree with him on. But aside from that and his eschatology that I would disagree with, R.C. Sproul is really, really, really worth listening to. Really worth listening to. And he's worth listening to on those subjects as well, because, hey, I could be wrong. But I would highly recommend, and that's Ligonier, Ligonier.org. and they've got an app as well, and they basically got almost all the stuff. And they've got they do a lot of conferences too, and they've got guest speakers there. And of course, MacArthur's been there many times, and many others that. So there's conferences on that app, and you can't really go wrong listening to R.C. Sproul. He's good, especially when everybody knows, if you ever hear the word or hear the name R.C. Sproul, usually it comes up under his Holiness of God book or series, and that was one that was really, really, I listened to the series, and it was absolutely everything it was cracked up to be. So, yeah, if you're looking for Trinity and Christology and attributes of God, I don't think you can go wrong with the late R.C. Sproul and the Ligonier app. One of my other, I'm just kind of going in order of my favorites, and of course MacArthur's one, and Ligonier is maybe not my second favorite, but they're right up there. But the third guy I would recommend would be S. Lewis Johnson. And he's a kind of a new find for me. I heard of his name before, but I'd never really listened to his preaching until about 6 months ago. And man, oh man, he's borderline challenging MacArthur on my number one favorite. He's got an app. Of course, he's passed away, but they've got an app. It's the Believers Chapel in Dallas is where he preached at. They still have a church there, and they have an app called the SLJ app, SLJ Institute app. And again, you got all of his sermons for free there, and they're organized by Old Testament, New Testament, and there's a few topical. He's real good on eschatology, real good. The two people I'd recommend on eschatology alone would be John MacArthur and S. Lewis Johnson, because they're the two that I know of. I'm sure there are more who are Calvinists, but they also believe in premillennialism, and I do think they're intertwined. I've always found an inconsistency with Calvinists, with them believing in the sovereignty and elect of God, and He's the one in control, and He's the one who chooses, and there's no dependence upon the human will and everything else, and yet they would say that since Israel rejected and killed their Messiah, that God is finished dealing with Israel, and He's replaced essentially the church for Israel. Or there's other views on that, but that's the primary view. And I always say, well, if he keeps his promises to his individual elect, why would he not keep his promise to his national elect, which is Israel? And again, I don't think you cannot deal with Romans chapter 11 in a literal way and believe that God does not have a future fulfillment for Israel. And in Romans 11 verse 12, chapter 11 verse 12, Romans chapter 11 verse, I don't have my Bible right in front of me, but I think it's 15. That whole chapter is basically saying that, yeah, they've been temporarily hardened because of their rejection of their Messiah, but there is a fulfillment coming in the future, and that is to say that there will be a national remnant who believes, all of them, every last one. It's what the tribulation period's about, is He purges Israel down to the believing remnant, and then they all, at one time, individually, it's an individual salvation, but it's all at the same time, simultaneously, they all are regenerated by the Spirit and believe in their Messiah, and that triggers His second coming. That's what actually, if you look at the book of Acts, chapter 3, that's what triggers the return of Christ, is Israel all believe. But anyway, I don't want to chase that right now. I could do some other shows on just purely eschatology. But the reason I like SLJ and John MacArthur as my two favorites is because the two doctrines I really, really am passionate about is doctrines of grace, or Calvinism, and eschatology. And I believe they both get them right. And they're both very, very solid, obviously, the original languages and everything else. So my number one would be John MacArthur. My number two would be S. Lewis Johnson. And then again, they both have websites and apps that have all the sermons for free. And I'm telling you, if you're not listening to MacArthur and S. Lewis Johnson as a Christian, you are definitely missing out. And I think you'll find them highly, highly edifying. And so, as I mentioned, The Ligonier app is good as well. But I probably would rank Ligonier probably fourth. I got one more guy I put in front of him, but I mentioned them just because I just happened to mention them. So my number one would be MacArthur, John MacArthur, gty.org. Number two would be SLJ, S. Lewis Johnson, SLJ Institute. Both of them have apps, all the preaching. Third, and right before Ligonier, would be Dr. James White. And his ministry is Alpha and Omega Ministries. And most of the stuff you get, he's a preacher, he's a pastor, or an elder, sorry. He's an elder at the Phoenix Reformed Baptist Church, so there's various different ways you can get Dr. White's material. But the main way that I've learned about it and listened to him is he has it's not a podcast, it's on YouTube. He puts it on YouTube, he streams it live. It's called The Dividing Line, and it's basically an apologetics. He's an apologist too, and he's got a show that he does usually twice a week called The Dividing Line. You can find that on YouTube. But his ministry is Alpha and Omega Ministries, and his website is AOMIN, Alpha and Omega Ministries, I think is what that stands for, AOMIN.org. And that'll take you to all that stuff. And on YouTube, you just type in Alpha and Omega. He's got a YouTube channel where he's posted all of his dividing lines. But also, on top of being an elder and having an apologetics show, he also does debates, where he debates. He's debated Roman Catholics. He's debated just about a lot of subjects. Homosexual marriage. He's debated a lot of Islamic debates he's been doing recently, and they're really fascinating to watch how he debates that. But he really is solid in a couple of issues, I think, and probably might be the number one person I've learned most about Calvinism, even though I was already a Calvinist when I learned about him. But he really, really is strong on that. He wrote a book, and he's just written books too. One of his more popular books is called The Potter's Freedom, and it's about that issue. And so when it comes to Calvinism, Doctrines of Grace, he's probably the top. And when it comes to, I've learned a lot. This is not one of my favorites, or not one of my passions, I guess. I do find it interesting, but textual transmission, how the Bible came about, and how, dealing with textual variants and the original languages and all these things, which I've never really cared much about, but he makes it pretty interesting. But he's definitely an expert on that. One other way he blessed me was, of course, you start hearing about Bible translations, and I started hearing that, because I learned early on that I didn't like to paraphrase. I didn't like it because I couldn't recognize it. I'd read it, and I'm like, I don't know what verse that is. And then, so I didn't like to paraphrase, but I didn't like the King James. I mean, I liked the, I knew it was a solid translation, but I just couldn't. I needed a translation off of that because I didn't know what those words meant, a lot of them. And so I ended up going with the NASB because I learned it was a literal translation, word for word from the Greek, but it was a modern translation. So I didn't have to translate the King James into my modern language. And there's other good ones. I'll do maybe a subject on her show on that sometime, but I'm a big fan of literal translations. But there are several good literal translations, including the NASB, ESV, and even, well, I'm not going to go there right now. I'm not going to do that. But anyway, I started hearing that these people talking about, well, if you don't use the King James Bible, you're not really using the Bible. Matter of fact, they would even say, if you're not using the King James Bible, you're using Satan's Bible. I started thinking, what? I didn't buy it, but I wanted to at least research and say, oh, well, where does this opinion come from? Because I'd already listened to enough people to know they weren't using the King James, and they weren't using Satan's Bible. But still, I thought, well, and so I started reading websites and all this about King James onlyism and all this stuff, and I was a little bit disturbed. So they make some reasonable points here, but I just didn't know. I told you, I don't know anything about translation issue. I didn't. I know a little bit more now, but I didn't know anything about the original languages and all the manuscripts and all that. And so I started freaking out, going, man, maybe they're right. And so anyway, he's got a book. So if you're struggling with that issue, Because you'll run into a lot of people who will say the King James is the only version of the Bible that's legit, and that's just flat out false. And but it's hard to refute. So you got to know your stuff a little bit in order to refute some of the points they make. Because on the surface, it does. Like I said, when I heard those points, I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, I need to look into that. But anyway, he's got a book. Dr. White has a book called The King James Only Controversy. And if you're struggling with that issue, that's the one book I'd get. Because it took me about 10 pages into that to give me a whole lot of comfort on, okay, I knew it because I just knew it. First off, I believed the Bible, the audio Bible I was listening to was NIV, I think, which is well, I brought it up. The NIV is not a literal translation. It's a dynamic. That means it's not word for word from the original Greek. It's thought for thought. But I don't have a problem with the NIV. Now, if I'm studying or prepare or wanting to teach something, I'll go with a literal translation. But when I'm listening to the Bible, I don't mind listening to the NIV sometimes. But anyway, that's what I was listening to when I got saved. And so I knew. Okay, I'm listening. I actually looked that up when I started hearing all this stuff about the Satan's Bible and everything. I thought, okay, well, what was I listening to? Because I was like, that'll give me some reassurance if I knew it wasn't King James, because I knew, King James. And so anyway. But anyway, so I didn't really believe that, but I struggled with it for just a little bit. But then after I started seeing him break down their points against, when he would explain those points, it didn't take long for me to be very, but it's really good to know, because again, you run into that a lot of places. Now, our local church does use the King James Bible, and I don't have a problem with that. And I asked for one of the very first things I asked my pastor was, I noticed that they preached out of the King James Bible, but I did ask him immediately, is this an issue where, are you a King James onlyist? I asked him, and he's not. And then we talk periodically about it. He's not a King James onlyist, but he's just like, that's what he's been teaching at uncomfortable and everything else. And I have no problem with that at all. But there's others who, well, like I said, you don't have to, you just can just start doing a search bar on Google, King James only, and you come up with a whole lot of craziness. And a lot of these people who, if you you run into a King James onlyist, they get heated pretty quick. They get real. Now, I don't know why. I haven't figured that out yet, but King James onlyists seem to be highly temperamental, say put it that way. Again, when you do, I've actually written a one-page paper. It's about all I know is one page on New Testament textual transmission. You can see that on crosscutcommentaries.simplesite.com under one-page essay, or maybe it's under lessons. I think it's under lessons. So that's just a basic one-page summary of that. That's about all I know. Like I said, I'm not an expert. Don't claim to be. But he is. Dr. White is an expert on that, and I would highly recommend that book. Even if you're not struggling with the King James only issue, personally, I would still recommend just about any of his books. But that one and The Potter's Freedom are really good, because you will run into people eventually as a Christian who are King James onlyists. So, and another subject that Dr. White is really, really solid on is kind of like R.C. Sproul and the Ligonier is the Trinity. He is really solid on the Trinity. Actually, he's probably the best teacher on the Trinity, and he's got another book I'd highly recommend. It's The Forgotten Trinity from Dr. James White. If you want to know about it, it's in depth. And again, he's really smart, but he's really good about teaching it in a level that you can understand. But especially if you're specifically looking to break down the original languages and all that, that's one of his specialties as well. But those three books, The Forgotten Trinity, The Potter's Freedom, and what's the third one? The King James Only Controversy by Dr. James White are 3 books that are very, very, very well worth reading. Very well worth reading. And again, you can listen to his Dividing Lines on YouTube. They got a website, aomin.org. Alpha and Omega on YouTube. You can just search bar that. That'll come up. It's a little red circle. And also on Sermon Audio, you can get, I think they put their Dividing Lines there on audio too, but you can also get his sermons that he preaches. Like I said, he's an elder in the Phoenix Reformed Baptist Church, which you can just do a search on Sermon. Oh, that's another app, which do the Sermon Audio is the app, and they have a website, sermonaudio.com. But there's also an app, Sermon Audio. That's a must-have app, and it's got just a collection of a whole bunch of good preachers. I imagine maybe you can find some bad ones on there, but I haven't found any yet. I don't know how they screen them or anything, but so is Dr. White. You can get his preaching. James White, just Phoenix Reformed Baptist Church, and he's got all kinds of, thousands probably sermons on him. He's been a elder for decades, and his preaching is solid too. So he would be number 3. A lot of different ways you can be blessed by him. I've mentioned those main ways would be Calvinism, the Trinity, apologetics, and just his preaching in general. And like we talked about earlier, Ligonier would be probably my number 4. Let's see here. Some other guys that I would highly recommend listening to. Justin Peters is another one. He's not a pastor or anything, but he is he has his own ministry, Justin Peters Ministries. He's got a website. I don't know that right in front of me, but if you just Google Justin Peters Ministry, it'll come up. And I think he's got a new YouTube channel that he's just started putting stuff up on. But you can get a lot of his stuff on YouTube as well. His specialty is dealing with the charismatic movement, and in particular the prosperity gospel. That's kind of his specialty. But I've also heard him on his church website. He preaches sometimes too, and he's a real solid preacher. And he used to have a radio program, and I think he's going to be getting one back soon. But his radio programs were, they go through different topics and different actually scriptures and stuff, and he's really a good exegeter also. But primarily, if you hear of Justin Peters in the Christian circles, you usually are thinking of his dealing with the charismatic movement. That's how I heard of him. He attended he spoke at the Strange Fire Conference a couple years ago, and that's how I heard of him. And then I started listening to I searched him on YouTube, and he's got a program or a seminar, I guess you call it. It's called Clouds Without Water, and it's about, the one I listened to had probably 7 or 8 hour-long programs, and man, he plays video and really explains how that works. And you can follow. I actually follow him on Twitter, and a lot of these guys are on Twitter, but some of them are active, some of them aren't. But he's a guy I'd recommend. Just anything you hear, anything he's preaching, or you can pick up his old radio shows. He's well worth listening to. Justin Peters Ministries. Maybe JustinPeters.org. I'm not sure, but you can search that out real easy. So he's another guy I absolutely would recommend. Another guy I've been listening to more recently, the past year or so, is a guy named Paul Flynn, and he does Megiddo. It's called Megiddo Radio, and he does Megiddo Films and Megiddo Media, MIGIDDO, and he does a radio show and a television show. He's on YouTube. If you just Google Paul Flynn on YouTube or Google, it'll come up with the Megiddo Radio and his YouTube channel and everything. And he's Presbyterian, and we disagree on the infant baptism, and we disagree on the eschatology. But when it comes to gospel issues and Calvinism, man, he's solid as a rock. And he's doing more and more stuff. I guess he always has done stuff on the charismatic movement and critiquing them. And he did a real good. How I actually heard of him was when the Shack movie came out. Something popped up on YouTube about it. He did something on a critique. I knew the Shack was garbage, but I didn't know exactly why it was garbage. I just knew it was garbage. But he did. I listened to a film he did on that, the Shack. It was that book that was done. Really horrible, blasphemous book, and they ended up making a movie out of it. But anyway, that's how I ended up finding him, and but he's solid. He's just real solid stuff. But again, he kind of drives me nuts with his eschatology sometimes. He said specifically, repeatedly, that he believes I think it was Boniface, the Pope in the 6th or 7th century, was the actual man of lawlessness, and I had contacted him a few times and thought, the Scripture says that Jesus Christ literally kills whoever the Antichrist is when at his second coming. And so how in the world could somebody who was alive and dead in the 6th or 7th century and Jesus Christ didn't return, how could that guy be the man of lawlessness or the Antichrist? But anyway, that's a side issue. But he's passionate about his stuff, and but he's definitely worth listening to on a lot of subjects. And he's worth listening to. Again, with the infant baptism, all that, I believe with all my heart that you shouldn't baptize an infant, and maybe I'll do a program on that sometime. But I believe baptism. There's not one instance of infant baptism in the entire Bible, and you got to make this connection to circumcision, which I just don't think is there. But anyway, I don't really want to chase that right now. But I'm pretty passionate about not infant baptism, and he's pretty passionate about infant baptism. So we disagree on some things. But like I said, I've learned a lot from him, and I respect the heck out of the guy because I don't know. I've donated some money to him and stuff, but he seems like he does all his stuff basically on his own funds, most of it. At least maybe he's getting more popular now. He's getting some help, but it seems like what I ever picked up, he's basically self-funding his ministry. Which, man, I was like, man, that's really admirable to do that, because that doesn't, most people are not self-funded. Especially, he puts on real good quality material. Now I'm recording this with a Bluetooth headset, and it's I know it's kind of hard to listen to sometimes, but it looked like he bought all his equipment and everything. But anyway, he's got like 300, and I think he's up to 300 and like 25 or something radio shows, indoor TV, Megiddo film shows. And like I said, aside from those two issues, I'd recommend him on anything, because you want to test everything. I don't want you believing in believers' baptism because I say it. I don't want you to believe in anything because I say it. I believe it's scriptural, but it's good to hear the other side too. And so anyway, Paul Flynn, Megiddo Radio, Megiddo Film, definitely worth listening to. Let's see here as I go along here. Oh yeah, another one. I probably have this guy. I would probably have ranked maybe 5th or 6th. Probably I'd have this. Yeah, I probably have him 5th, Justin 6th, and Paul 7th. Again, it's like I'm doing a AP rankings or anything, but just on where I put him. But this guy is not as well known as these other guys, but his name is Stephen Armstrong. Not Steven Anderson, okay? There's this lunatic out there called Steven Anderson, and he's pretty well known, and he's a spitfire guy. He throws stuff. I don't even know if he's a Christian. He's out of his head, but he's a King James onlyist, imagine that, and he's he's just really, really pretty intense. But anyway, this not Stephen, not that guy, not Steven Anderson. This guy's named Stephen Armstrong, and his ministry It's called Verse by Verse Ministries, and they have an app, and he's taught through. He goes exactly, the name of the app is Verse by Verse, and that's what he does. He teaches the verse by verse through the scriptures, which is the way I think that should be done, is verse by verse through book. But and he's real solid on eschatology. He's real in depth on eschatology, and he's a Calvinist too, but he's not as passionate about that subject as others. But he's real solid. And again, his app, Verse by Verse Ministries. If you go to the Play Store or the Apple Store, or you can get that app, and that's got he's preached through quite a bit of the New Testament, and there's probably, I'd guess, total of 300 or 400 sermons on there, and he's real solid. And he's real. Like I said, if it comes to eschatology, I've never seen any more. He's got 32 sermon series through the Book of Revelation, which is about as in depth, even more in depth than MacArthur, as I've ever found. And he's really knowledgeable about eschatology. But he's real good at preaching a lot of the other stuff too. Real solid. He actually, I don't know. I think he was a pastor already before, but recently they've actually started a church, a verse by verse church in Texas somewhere. I think it's San Antonio. And he's preaching currently through the Book of Matthew, and he's really in depth. He does the original languages, and he's just real solid. So I would probably put him up there. Man, I might even move him up above Ligonier just because of his eschatology, but I definitely recommend him. Again, it's a Verse by Verse Ministries. The guy's name is Stephen Armstrong, and he's real solid. They do seminars and conferences and stuff, and he's brought in. They did a seminar on eschatology one time, and there was another guy there named Tommy Ice. I'd never heard of him before, but he was real knowledgeable on end times. I mean, real knowledgeable. And as somebody who's a premillennialist, you can get caught up in just I've gone through cycles in my life where that's all it was eschatology and trying to predict this and predict that, and you can get way out of hand real quick. But these guys don't. Neither does MacArthur. They're biblical. They're just passionate about a literal future tribulation and a literal future rapture and a literal future. Everybody would agree on the second coming of Christ, but how that sorts itself out. Any literal, this is what sold me mainly there's just hundreds of Old Testament scriptures that make promises to the nation of Israel that are unfulfilled. And they're not to the church. I believe the New Covenant is partially fulfilled in the church, no doubt about that. There are some segments of that, but there are some segments, many, of the promises in the Old Testament were to the nation of Israel, and a kingdom to them that has not been fulfilled. And then you match that up with Romans 11 and how that matches up with the 70th week of Daniel and how that matches up with the Book of Revelation. It's just, to me, I don't know how you could stay sane and read literally through the Bible and not say, God's got something in store that has not happened yet for the nation of Israel. But anyway, another side issue. But when it comes to eschatology, the three guys I would recommend, if you're interested in that, would be John MacArthur, S. Lewis Johnson, and Stephen Armstrong of Verse by Verse Ministries. So that's another one I've learned a ton from. Okay, let's see here. Another guy who's really good, and he's doing eschatology too. He's a pastor. He's a pastor, and he also has a radio show called No Compromise Radio, and I think it's nocoradio.com. The NoCo is for No Compromise, and his name is Mike Abendroth, Abendroth, and like I said, he's a pastor out. I think it's Bethlehem Bible Church in somewhere near Boston, and you can get that app too. I've listened to a lot of his sermons. But his name is Mike Abendroth, but I learned about him through No Compromise Radio, and he still does that. And he's solid, Doctrines of Grace guy, and he's real solid on eschatology, and the radio show is really helpful. And he's real active on Twitter too. There's, like I said, just about everybody's got Twitter, but it's a lot of the ministries and pastors, which understandably so, just basically post stuff. They don't really interact. But Abendroth and Peters and James White and Paul Flynn, and they actually get on there and interact with people, and I find that encouraging, because you can ask some questions, and sometimes you can challenge what they're saying, and sometimes they'll respond, sometimes they won't. But Abendroth, I don't really follow too awfully many people, but he always fills my Twitter page up because he tweets a lot. But he's definitely worth looking into. The No Compromise Radio, NoCoRadio.com, and he preaches at Bethlehem Bible Church, and he's done some other conferences and things as well. Oh, let's see here. I'm trying to do at least 10. I've got more, but I don't have them written down right now. Like I said, I'm on my mower. Well, a guy I'll mention here that I listen to, he actually is a pastor or an elder at a church somewhere in Minnesota. And he he's into apologetics and polemics, and so he does I'm trying to think of the website's name, Pulpit and Pen, and he does a radio or like a podcast every now and then. You can get a lot of these podcasts on Podcast Addict. That's where I get mine at. He's on there. I can't remember the name of the podcast. But his name's J.D. Hall, and you can, pulpitandpen.org, I think is the website. And I'll say this, I really like the guy. He's a funny guy. But he can be really kind of, divisive or condescending. And I know when you're dealing with false teachers, I don't mind it as much. But I still don't probably. He does the mocking voice and things like that. And like I said, he's a really funny guy, but he's solid as a rock when it comes to doctrine. And he goes after the right people mainly. Now he's gone after some others that I like that I've mentioned on this program, and I think when you're dealing with other believers, you need to tone down the mocking and everything else, and that's where I'll sometimes kind of turn him off for a while because I don't like that necessarily. But like I said, he's really, really solid when it comes to identifying false teachers and going after them, which, like I said, when you're going after a false teacher, I could swallow some mocking, even though the Bible says we're supposed to treat them with gentleness and respect and all that. But definitely when you're dealing with believers, you're supposed to treat them with, you're not supposed to condescend and mock and make fun of their voice and everything else. But like I said, having said that, I do listen to him, and I do recommend him to a certain degree. Let's see here. I don't know if that's 8 or 9, but trying to think. I'm just trying to basically think who's on my phone and who I listen to quite a bit. Alistair Begg, you can't go wrong with him. I don't listen to him as much as I used to, but he's pretty popular. That's ALISTAIRBEGG, Alistair Begg. He's a pastor at a church in Cleveland, and he's Truth for Life is his website and app, and he's a solid preacher. So you can see, honestly, this is kind of where I fall. I'm not saying there's not good preachers of the word who are not Calvinists. I know there are. I don't have to listen to them. But if I'm going, I just primarily don't recommend them because I just think it affects so many things. So that's, you can see that mainly, that's the main qualification of somebody I'll listen to is I want them to be a Doctrines of Grace guy because it just affects the way you do everything. And I just can't think of anybody who's not a Calvinist that I recommend. Again, I'm not saying there's not good preachers of the word out there who are not Calvinists or anything else. I'm not saying that because I know there are. I'm just saying ones that I think there's better to listen to. If you have limited time on this planet and you have limited time to listen to things, and that's where one of my things are. Now, I'm passionate about eschatology, as you know, but I'd certainly recommend people who would differ with me on eschatology. We've been through several today, Paul Flynn, R.C. Sproul, and so there's people that, when it comes to the gospel and the doctrines of grace, man, they're solid as a rock, and that's the ultimate issue, to me. Another guy I listen to, he doesn't really have he's got a ministry, and but it's a missionary ministry, and his name is Paul Washer, Washatr, and he runs Heart Cry Ministries, and he's actually been kind of down for the last year or so because he had a heart attack, and he's been recovering from that. But you can go to YouTube, and this is what I do. You want to find his sermons, just go to YouTube and just type in the search bar Paul Washer, Washatr, and he's worth listening to. He's a guy who looks like his head's going to explode when he preaches. He's that passionate about it, but he is really, really good and worth listening to. You need to hear Paul Washer's sermon. If you haven't, you're missing out on that. So, there's no particular website I know of. I know he does the Heart Cry Ministry, so I know they have a website, but I don't think you can find a whole lot of his sermons there. And I don't think he's a pastor of a church or anything. I think he just goes places and preaches, or used to. And but the best way to do that is just to go on YouTube, then search bar him, and he's definitely somebody who's worth listening to. Again, he's a Calvinist. He's just one of those guys that he's so passionate about the Lord and about things that he probably needs to take a little. I'm not glad he had a heart attack or anything. I'm glad he got some time off, because he looked like he was getting tired, and he's way too. Hey, how you doing? Had one of my ex-customers walk by me, Monsieur Babillon. But Paul Washer, definitely worth listening to. See here, I got a little bit more time here, and then I'll close it down once I'm done mowing this section. Who else would I recommend? Who else is on my phone? Actually, I'll say this, okay? Well, I don't know if I recommend this guy or not. I'm just going to leave that alone. I don't want to recommend him, but I also don't want to talk bad about it. I had somebody in mind who's got some good stuff, but he's got some problems. So I just probably wouldn't recommend him. Okay, well, just the people, again, those are all people who I would just absolutely say you have to listen to them. You have to check them out. And you really would be edifying to you, glorifying to God if you did. They're must listen to. Check them out. Again, my particular absolute no-brainers would be John MacArthur, gty.org, Grace to You Sermons app. S. Lewis Johnson, he's got an app, SLJ Institute. James White and Alpha and Omega Ministries, absolutely, you have to check him out. Verse by Verse Ministries, I'd check him out for sure. Stephen Armstrong, and then obviously Ligonier, definitely worth listening to as much as you can there. So those are my no-brainers. Hey, Bedroth, absolutely, all those guys I mentioned are definitely people that I think you should listen to and would be highly benefited, highly edified from listening to them. And I'm sure I'm missing some that I had on my top of my head here. There's a couple real quick that you wouldn't hear of outside of they're just local here, but definitely worth listening to. It's on Sermon Audio. Again, you can go on Sermon Audio and get a lot of good sermons. But Reformed Baptist Church of Louisville is, and his name is, the head lead pastor there is Jim Savistio. Savistio, I think. But if you go to if you just search for Reformed Baptist Church of Louisville, I think that's what it is. Or maybe Louisville Reformed Baptist Church. I think it's Reformed Baptist Church of Louisville. On Sermon Audio app, again, that's an app you have to have. You have to have the Sermon Audio app because you can find a lot of these people that I've talked about and more just by searching them there. But anyway, Reformed Baptist Church of Louisville, Jim Savistio, and there's another guy. There's a couple other guys there that preach there that are a younger guy just got ordained. His name's Derek Reed, R-E-I-D. And he's really a solid preacher, real methodical, real knowledgeable. Like I said, he's a younger guy, but he's really worth listening to. And the lead pastor, Jim Savistio, is real solid. And then there's another guy there named, I can't remember his first name, is Grievous, Grievous. And he's an elder there, and he's really, really good. And this is just a little nugget that I've actually been over there a few times and listened to them preach in person, and they're really solid, really solid. Again, I disagree. There's a Reformed Baptist Church. They're Reformed, but they're Credo Baptist, but their eschatology is different than mine. But they're still one with gospel and doctrines of grace, absolutely. And those would be a couple of people that you might not hear about. Otherwise, because the reason I've heard about them is because they're local, but you can hear them on Sermon Audio. Again, Jim Savistio, Saviostio, I think, and Derek Reed on. They're on the Sermon Audio app of at Reformed Baptist Church of Louisville. I think it's. I'm trying to think if I'm driving crazy because I don't want you to have a hard time finding it. It's either Reformed Baptist Church of Louisville or it's the Louisville Reformed Baptist Church. I think there's only one in Louisville, so it wouldn't be too hard to find on Sermon Audio if you just did a search on them. So those are some people. Again, what I try to do here is I went through a lot of listening, and again, that's the one thing the Lord blessed me with was being able to mow grass and listen to sermons. And so I've listened to probably more sermons than imagine most in a 10-year time span because I've had so much time to do it. I mow grass usually, like right now, it's May, and I'll be actually mowing grass more than 14 hours a day, which, man, it wears me out. I'm 47, and every year, man, how am I going to do this? But I'm grateful to have work. But anyway, I've been able to listen to a lot, and I believe I got reasonable discernment the Lord's given me. And hopefully I can shortcut a lot of stuff that you check these guys out. And I've listened to a lot of bad ones too, but I can pick those out a little quicker now. And there's many others. There's many other solid preachers. But if I were to say, okay, somebody were to come up to me and say, I'm a new Christian, who should I listen to? And I'll run these off real quick, and then I'll end the show. The ones I've listened to in this order. This will be my official top 10. All right, and I'll probably adjust this down the road, but I would say the one you want, number one, I would say John MacArthur and the Grace to You. And he's preached 40 years, and there's other preachers at Grace Church where he preaches. The Phil Johnson, he's pretty well known, and some others there that are just that church is full of good preachers now. But and GraceChurch.org, you can get a lot of stuff there too as well. But Grace to You Ministries is the MacArthur, the one where all the MacArthur sermons are. And again, the sermon app is just outstanding. And they got a channel on YouTube, and he's not hard to find. But he would be my number one. And he's, like I said, he's preached through the whole New Testament verse by verse. So I don't know how many sermons he's got, but it's probably more than you can even listen to. But I would just, you can kind of check the dates on the sermon app, and because you can do it by actually scripture, or you can do it by topic. And he obviously, with anybody, they get better with time. And so the very first couple, I could tell a difference between when he was preaching in the, I think he started there in, well, do the math. I think he's coming up on 50 years. But anyway, when you could tell when he was a little younger and as he got more knowledgeable. But even back then, initially, he's solid. So he'd be my number one guy. And then I would go, like I said, this is a new guy to me. He's not new. He's actually passed away. And yes, Lewis Johnston. And you go to the you can get the app, SLJ Institute app, and it's got a lot of his. I don't know if it's got all his sermons, but it's got a lot of them. And I've really fallen in love with that guy. He's a solid preacher, solid doctrine, and he's funny, and he's really technical on the languages, more so than even MacArthur. Dr. White, who, well, we'll get to him in a second, but S.L. Johnson's real technical, and he breaks down the Greek, and really, like I said, he's a solid preacher guy. I could listen to him all day. And number three would be James White. Again, you can get his stuff a lot of places. His books are some of the best books. And MacArthur's written books, I didn't even mention that. There's books you can get there. You can search that out. But three of the favorite books I've ever read is for Christian perspective would be those three I mentioned: Dr. White's Potter's Freedom, King James Only Controversy, and The Forgotten Trinity. That Forgotten Trinity, I really think it should be. It's really good to read. I mean, if you want a real in-depth understanding of the Trinity. And you can see, I've done I don't know if I've done a radio show on the Trinity, but I did a Bible lesson with my parents on the Trinity, and I've written that. The lesson's on there, on the website. And I was shaped by basically R.C. Sproul and James White on that. But that understanding of the Trinity, man, it really just opens up a real love for God and a love for His Word and an understanding of His Word. And Dr. White really helped me along on that. And like I said, doctrines are great. He's solid. Debates, his sermons. So I would definitely recommend him. Number three, and again, Alpha and Omega Ministries, AOMIN.org, YouTube channel. You could just search his name. Sermon audio, you can get his sermons. And in his books, those three books, and he's got other books on Roman. He's real solid apologist against Roman Catholicism. So he's definitely a guy who's been doing it a long time, and it's definitely worth reading. Definitely worth listening to. And the Dividing Line podcast, or I don't know, call it podcast, it's more than a podcast. He does video, and it's live, and does call-ins and everything else. And that definitely is worth listening to as well. So he'd be number three. I guess I'd probably still, I don't know, it's like I'm doing the NCAA tournament bracket or something, but R.C. Sproul and Ligonier, as much as he helped me with the Trinity and Christology and the attributes of God, I would put him number four. Number five, verse by verse ministries, Stephen Armstrong. Probably put Abendroth 6, just because he's got more stuff out there. You can get his sermons at Bethlehem Bible Church. I don't know the exact website, but if you search Mike Abendroth, and it'll pull up his church. I think it's Bethlehem Bible Church somewhere in Massachusetts. And his No Compromise Radio, NoCoRadio.com or org. So you could search for that. So I'd probably put him in 6 because he's got more volume. And Justin Peters, probably put 7. Let's see here. Who else did I mention here? I can't remember the other. Paul Flynn would be right there. And for the rest of them, I just kind of finished. And there again, they're all, I'm not talking bad about them. It's just my personal favorite. Justin Peters, like I said, is really solid. I'm surprised, actually, that obviously I know it works. You're not an elder if you're not called of God, and he must not feel that, but I always think, I'm surprised he's not an elder or something, just because he's a great preacher, too. He's a kind-hearted guy, and real mature Christian, and some of these guys that I've mentioned. Oh yeah, JD Hall. Some of these guys I've mentioned, not to mention that name right then, but if you can get some temperament with, and you can get some pride with, some arrogance with, maybe a little bit, like we all struggle with. But Justin Peters is one of those guys who's just really mature Christian. Never seen him even get upset, but I'm sure he has. But like I said, he handles things pretty maturely. And like I said, he's great. He just did a recent thing on YouTube with Costi Hinn. Another guy that he's Benny Hinn's. I'm thinking here. I think nephew, and he got saved out of that garbage. I'm not calling Benny Hinn garbage. I'm saying his ministry. But anyway, he's been doing some stuff with Justin Peters, and that guy. I don't know how long he's been. A minute. I think he's a pastor now. I'm not sure. But man, I've listened to him talk a few times, and man, he's very well spoken. So I praise the Lord for all these. I know all these. I always say that anything any of these guys have is just because the Lord gave it to them. So I'm not trying to prop them up, but just trying to tell you who's worth listening to. And heck, Costi Hinn's another guy. You can YouTube search him, and Costi, C-O-S-T-I, Hinn. He's real good on the charismatic, obviously coming out of that. He's real good on that. But anyway, Justin and them and him did a couple of like 4 or 5 TV show thing on man, if you search it, you can find it on YouTube. It's some kind of a channel that's got a different name, SOJ4TV or something. But anyway, so Justin Peters definitely, and Megiddo Radio, Megiddo Films, Paul Flynn definitely. Like I said, JD Hall, pulpitandpen.org. You got to take him with a grain of salt because I've never listened to him without being. Well, I almost feel like I'm listening to WWE, and it's not maybe the greatest thing in the world, but again, he's right on when it comes to going after these cats, these guys who are just wolves. He just kind of does it, and I don't know. It just makes I struggle with myself, being condescending and sarcastic towards people because it's so easy to do. And he does that a lot. And like I said, I swallow a little bit better when he's talking about like Kenneth Copeland or people like that who are just flat out wolves. So I don't mind the mocking of them, even though I'm not 100% sure. But I don't like him mocking other Christians, and he does that. But anyway, he's worth listening to. Definitely worth. He's got guts. I'll give him that, man. That guy. He'll talk about issues a lot of people won't talk about because it's even some of these other guys that are super, super solid. They kind of avoid certain things, it seems like, because it's going to irritate some people. And this guy's usually, J.D. Hall is usually on the front lines of some topics that are controversial. And so I'll give him that. I'll give him a A++ for courage. So anyway. But yeah, I laugh because I do. Sometimes I'll go on a binge and listen to 6 or 7 of his shows. And I'm like, man, I just can't listen anymore. So I go watch a couple of WWE pay-per-views. But I said it tongue in cheek, but you know what I mean. Anyway, he's worth listening to. I'd recommend him. And I've actually heard him preach too. I think he's an elder. And I just wish he would have a little more civility when he's dealing with other Christians. Because I don't think it's biblically ever okay to mock another believer, publicly especially. Disagree, yeah. Mock, make fun of. So who else did I mention? Can't remember now. I think I've re-mentioned them all again. But hopefully, like I said, hopefully this will be something that you can at least check these out. I think if you're new Christian, old Christian, if you haven't listened to these guys, they really are worth listening to. I really think if you love the Bible and love the Word of God, and these guys are all biblical and really, really blessed by God teachers. So I'll end it there. Hopefully I'll be doing some more. I just kind of, on these radio shows, like I said, I teach the Bible study. We're going through Romans. More technical there. Obviously, I got some sitting down. I got a Bible. These radio shows I'm just going to do while I mow, and so I'm not going to be quoting, scripture. It's just kind of just more general talking and recommendations and things like that. You can kind of tell the last couple how we've gone. Anyway, I really hope you'll check those ministries out. They're really, really, really worth checking out. Even if you're not a Calvinist, even if you're not a premillennialist, or even they're definitely Word of God or men of God, preachers of God, who are blessed of God, and you can definitely benefit from them. And like I said, there's issues that I'm passionate about that I disagree with some of these people on. But again, I admire when somebody's got a different take on something. If they got the gospel right, I've learned, like I said, Paul Flynn's a good example. I've learned a ton from that guy. I have a lot of admiration for the guy. It drives me crazy sometimes because he's really passionate about some things that I think he really gets wrong. But I still have. There's been several times where I'm like, man, that was a good point. I never even considered that. And so you don't want to just isolate yourself from anybody who disagrees with you, even on a major thing. And if they get the gospel right, they're worth listening to. And with me, I told you my particular issue is, I think if you understand that God is the one who's decisive in salvation and not man, it affects a lot. It affects your preaching, affects everything. And so that's kind of my prerequisite for me to listen nowadays. Now again, I'm not saying that there's not people who are not Calvinists or not worth listening to. That's definitely not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you're asking me, these are the people I'd recommend. And even if you're not a Calvinist. Because I'm not a Calvinist because of John MacArthur or R.C. Sproul or James White or anybody else. I'm a Calvinist because I believe the Bible teaches on that one specific subject that Calvin got that right. Now there's other subjects that I think John Calvin got it way wrong. But that's just the word that is associated with the sovereignty of God and salvation. It's critical. As you know, if you listen to anything that's ever done, you know it's critical. So again, I pray this is a blessing to you. And until next time, may the Lord Jesus Christ be exalted. Amen.